Hello, everyone. Larry McCain with McCain and Associates Realty, powered by Berkshire Hathaway Home Services. How is everyone today? It is a beautiful day today, although there's quite a bit of rain in the forecast. Rain today here in Elk Grove, Sacramento region. Of course, last week it was hot as all get out, 90 plus degrees, 95 degrees, and today we are dodging rain, but it's a beautiful thing. We need the rain in the mountains because we know it's going to be a very warm summer. So as promised, I wanted to bring a guest speaker here today to talk to you all. And today who will be joining us is Sam Hosey with Hosey Law. Sam specializes in wills and trusts, but really he's a knowledge of all things when it comes to law. He's been helping us with the CARES Act and the PPP program. I mean, he has been the authority on this. So let me go ahead and bring Sam in here real quick. All right. Let's see. Give me 1 second. There he is.
Hi.
Hey, Sam, how are you?
Good. How are you, Larry?
I'm doing great. I've already introduced you to everyone. And of course, again, Sam Hosey with Hosey Law. Sam has been practicing law for 7 years now. As I mentioned earlier, just a wealth of knowledge in everything that's going on today, but in particular to what he works with. He specializes in wills and trusts. And so, Sam, I've got a couple of questions for you, but before I begin, go ahead and say hello to everybody out there.
Hi, everybody. I'm Sam Hosey.
Awesome. Before I go with the questions, industry questions, tell them a little bit about your family, who you are, and how long you've been in town.
Yeah, so I've been up here since college. I went to UC Davis, and then I went to McGeorge. I stayed up here. I have a wonderful wife, a 4-year-old son, and we're supposed to have our second in September. So
awesome.
That'll be an interesting experience. Yeah.
Congratulations. Let me tell you, if you want more kids, I've got some. I'll give them to you, man.
I'll go at my own pace.
That's smart, because I used to have hair like yours. Now this is what I have after 4 kids. Anyway, Sam, as I mentioned earlier to the audience, you have been a wealth of knowledge to us, and I wanted to bring great value to our audience and have you here. And thank you again for joining us.
Thank you. Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about your bailiwick. You really specialize in wills and trusts, probates, and things of that nature. Let me ask you a question, because a lot of folks, they don't really understand the importance of wills and trusts and how it affects probate. In fact, I think I mentioned to you through a previous discussion that someone had posted in my one of my social media feeds asking for a trust attorney, and I know how important it is. But let me ask you this question. What is important, or why is it important to have a will and or a trust?
Yeah, so let me back up. So when you pass away, everything that you own, home, bank accounts, maybe your stamp collection, all of your personal property, everything that you own has to go through a court process called probate. Now that court process is going to determine where all of your stuff goes, who inherits what. Now, if California law has some default laws, so there's already going to be who gets what under California law. But the problem is that court process is very, very expensive in California. So about 5 to 7% of the gross value of everything that goes into the court process, that goes into probate, is going to be taken out to pay for that court process. And so that's a big deal, because in California, our real estate prices are very, very high, and the equity may not be a whole lot, but still the probate costs are going to be calculated based upon that gross value of everything that goes in. And so, if you own a home here in Sacramento, bank accounts, other things, your family potentially could be on the hook for $40,000, $50,000 of legal fees. And and in addition, that court process, well, without COVID, the court process could usually take a year and a half just to have that completed and just to have the family members that you've left behind receive their inheritance.
Wow.
And so what we do is I put together documents called the trust. And what that trust does is that we take all of your assets while you're alive, we put them into the trust, and when you pass away, there's nothing to go through probate. So the trust owns the assets. When you pass away, the trust distributes those assets how you want them distributed without the tens of thousands of dollars in legal fees and the year and a half wait. The trust itself can be completed in about 4 months and maybe cost maybe $2,000 or $3,000 in legal fees, depending upon who you ask. So it's just a much cheaper, much faster, much easier way for your family to receive their inheritance after you passed away. And to go back to a will or trust, even if you have a will, your assets still have to go through probate, except instead of having the default California rules, the will is going to explain who inherits what. So just because you have a will doesn't mean you avoid probate. You still have to go through probate, but it's better than nothing. So.
Yeah, it's funny. That's what I was going to mention earlier. Some people think, oh, I have a will. That takes care of everything. It has instructions on who gets what and all that good stuff. But as you just mentioned, really having a trust is what's going to guard those finances from, from the government taking those exorbitant fees from. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. So the fees really come down to the fact that in California, unfortunately, the attorneys who take care of that process are paid based upon the gross value of those assets. So they're not being paid based upon an hourly rate. They're paid based on a percentage of those assets. And so even if you have a will, you're still going through probate, you're still paying, your family members are still going to be paying that high percentage. And, it's especially important, for example, if you have minor children or younger children, that $50,000, $60,000 they may end up paying could pay for college. It could pay for a down payment for a home, start a business, raise a family. So, it's really taking away from the next generation's ability to really grow that wealth in a meaningful way.
Yeah, that's so important. And it sounds like a very sound financial, I don't even want to say investment, but, a necessity. You mentioned you can spend upwards of, 40,000 or so plus, depending upon the size of, the assets of the deceased or the party, as opposed to, $2,000, give or take, earlier on in the process, and it continues to edit that, throughout the lifetime, which will save you just tons of money and time, right?
And, attorneys aren't generally cheap, super cheap, but, an ounce of prevention is really worth a pound of cure, right? And so you're really looking at paying an estate planning attorney and getting all these documents in place as something that is going to benefit and help the people that you leave behind. It really is, you looking out for them and making sure that they're taken care of in the best way possible under the law. I mean, nobody likes talking about dying, or, I joke that, seeing me is like having the same amount of fun as going and getting a root canal. Nobody wants to sit down with an attorney and talk about legal stuff.
I'll talk with you, man. I love sitting talking with you.
but doing it is really making sure that you're leaving, that when you pass away, your family is really left in the best position possible, so that, the home that you've worked hard for, the bank account that you've worked hard for, everything that you've worked and gained in your life is preserved as best as possible for the next generation. Yeah. And that's really what the goal is. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. You kind of touched in your descriptions of the two, you touched on the differences, but I want to spend some time, if we can, to highlight the differences between the wills, so that everyone can kind of know.
Yeah. And so to kind of go back, so, with the trust, we're avoiding the probate fees, we're avoiding the court process. So, the year and a half, we're avoiding that. The trust can usually be wrapped up in 3 or 4 months, 5 months, maybe. In addition, there's other things that you can do with the trust that you can't do with the will. So, for example, if you have minor children and they're going through probate, either with a will or without a will, as soon as they turn 18, the judge is going to give them their entire inheritance the day they turn 18. And so that means that, if you're leaving them half a home in Sacramento, if they want to, go on a cruise or buy an expensive car or gamble it or whatever they want to do, there's no control and no support on how they actually spend that money, spend that inheritance. Wow. As opposed to a trust, with a trust, what we do, if the client wants, is that we put controls on limits on how that money is used. So for example, we can say they get their inheritance a third at 21, a third at 25, and a third at 30, so that they're kind of graduated into getting their full inheritance. We can also do something that's called a Dynasty Trust, which means that the money stays inside of it, is continued to own by a trust, by this legal relationship, this legal document. And the trust can pay for things like the kids' education, medical expenses, um, you know, living expenses, so buying a home for them.
Mhm.
But at the same time, because the kids don't actually own any of those assets, if they're going through a divorce, or if they're going through bankruptcy, or if they have medical bills they can't pay,
Right.
those creditors can't actually go after the assets that you left behind.
Oh, wow.
So you're able to give them the benefits of that inheritance while also protecting them from squandering it. And let me back up. So when I say that the trust owns those assets, it's probably best to think of the trust kind of like a separate legal company. It's not a company, but kind of think of that, or a legal vehicle where we're putting the home, the bank accounts, all of your assets in the separate legal vehicle, and it's able to continue to exist and operate how you've chosen it to operate after you've passed away. So even if you passed away, that trust can continue to own those things and give them to your children how you see fit. 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, 15 years down the road, however you'd like that to happen. So
it sounds like it provides a lot of financial protection for future generations at Dynasty Trust, so that everything still stays within the trust itself. And life happens, as you know. People get married, they get divorced. Unfortunately, accidents happen. Certain states are more litigious than others, and so that shields it away from other hands reaching out to it. Is that what I understand?
Right. I think the Dynasty Trust is really the best of both worlds, because again, you're saying, I want to provide for my children when they grow up, when they're ready to buy a home, start a family, start a business, go to school, whatever. You're still able to provide support for that, but at the same time, you're really protecting those assets so they're not squandered. Because if you think back to when you're 18 or when I was 18, I received, if I would have received a big check, a big inheritance,
be gone.
Yeah, it's not gonna stay around very long. And so, at that point, that home that you saved for, that you worked hard for, the cash that you worked hard for, it's just gonna be squandered, most likely by an 18-year-old. So that's what we really are trying to avoid with the Dynasty Trust.
Yeah, Sam, that's great information. Let me ask you this: talk a little bit about the services that you provide and how people can get a hold of you if they want to talk about their current assets, wills, trusts, and things of that nature.
So I always provide free consultations. The first consultation is actually kind of an educational process where I sit down with you and I explain to you exactly what would happen to all of your assets, what would happen to your family members, your minor children, your adult children, what would happen without any of the documents in place. And then, if that's something that concerns you and you want a different result, we can go ahead and design an estate plan that fits your needs right then and there. So that's a free consultation. And then I also offer free guardianship programs. And we didn't talk about that, Larry, but the guardianship program is really designed so that parents if something happens to the parents, they're able to choose who raises those minor children into adulthood.
Important. That is so important.
Yes. And so it's important because without that in place, a judge who is going to determine where your minor children are going to live. So the judge doesn't know what you wanted, what your wishes were have been, doesn't know the family dynamic, or who already loves the children, who gets along with the children, or things like who already has the same parenting values as you. The judge, it's going to be extremely difficult for the judge to kind of take those things into consideration. Yeah. And so what happens is, what's easy for the judge to take into consideration are things like income, occupation, home, cars, kind of those objective things. And those things may not matter to you at all about how the child is actually raised. Right. Sure the uncle of the kids have a good job, but is that somebody that you want to raise those kids?
Right.
And so the judge is going to say, well, the uncle is a doctor and makes, $250 or $300 a year. So it seems like a good place to raise the kids. Well, you're thinking, hey, that doctor, he's a doctor, but we don't share the same parenting values. Right. The kids don't get along with them great. Right. We have we have a different outlook on life.
Right.
as opposed to maybe, for example, a secretary or mechanic or somebody like that who maybe doesn't have as much money, not as fancy of a car, fancy of a house, but
Right.
share the same parenting values you do, religious values, life values, those kinds of things where you're saying, hey, I'd much rather have my children go live with that person because that's how I want them raised.
Yeah.
And so, without those decisions in place on paper, you can't make a guarantee, can't make any promises about what the judge is going to choose.
Yeah, and I you know what? I'm sure that happens quite often. I mean, just because you make a lot of money doesn't necessarily mean you have the same value. It's a very, very good point. Sam, what's a good number where people can get a hold of you?
Yeah. So, so my email is sam, S-A-M, at hoseylaw.com, HOSEYLAW.com. You can email me or call me or text message me at 916-524-8849.
Awesome. And
I'll
also
hear from you and answer questions and emails, whatever you have for me. So.
Yep. And what I'll do is I will post this on social media. I'll tag Sam there so you can get a hold of him as well. Folks, Sam has been just, a mountain of information for us. We appreciate his time. But before I let you go, Sam, I got to ask you, I know the audience is wondering, tell me, what is that background? Where are you at?
Yeah, so this is the tide pools at Montana de Oro, which is a state park right outside San Luis Obispo. And if I could be there 24 hours a day, I probably would. But anytime I get vacation time, that's where we head out. So it's a happy place.
That's awesome. That's awesome. All right, Sam. Hey, thank you again for your time. I'm going to send you right over to the waiting room here and finish out here. Thanks again. Sam Hosey, ladies and gentlemen, with Hosey Law.
Thank you, guys. See you later.
All right, guys. As you can see, we bring great information to you. Thank you once again for tuning in. You have a wonderful day. If you have any questions, feel free to give us a call, message us. If you have questions for Sam, message us, give us a call. We love to help you. Again, Larry McCain with McCain & Associates Realty. You all have a wonderful day. Take care.